بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Good morning to everyone. MashaAllah. Hope everybody rested well. So I was asked to talk about our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what I would like to do is just mention some basic obligations that all of us are responsible for first. There are obligations that we have as Muslims to our Creator, which each and every one of us are responsible for. And it falls under wisdom. You know, Allah says, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. You know, no soul can carry the burden of another soul. This burden, this responsibility. So, these things were so important that, you know, scholars would write poems about them. There was a really interesting educational explosion in the 2nd century in the Muslim world. It's almost akin to the internet now, and what's happening and how education is being decentralized and made accessible to the masses. We were talking about this a minute ago, and you reminded me of it, Sheikh Muhammad, and that is poetry. You know, the Muslim scholars took, you name any science, and they made a rap song out of it. Sincerely, nahu, you know, grammar, you know, they say, you know, very simple poem, and they'd write like Ibn Malik, you know, he wrote a 1,000-line poem to his son about grammar. Like that, as a poem. So that really made knowledge accessible to people. Why? Because they memorized everything. So I had a teacher, Sheikh Ahadeeth, who was blind, who lived in Bab Zuwayla in Cairo. And he was a poet. And I said, how did you become a poet? He said, my mom taught me. I said, how did your mom teach you poetry? Because I knew that his mother was illiterate. He said, she lived in an age where people were poets. It was a social experience. And then he was such a great poet, you know, I'd bring my kids to his house to take blessings from him. And, you know, he would say, who's with you? I said, Shifat, my daughter Malik. He said, Shifat hafidati wa akhuha Malik. Allah najji min al-maharik, abuhuma Suhaibun fihi kufr, wa ummuhuma mutahharatun kadhalik. He just start rapping. I was like, man, how did you do that? You know? And he's like, I was raised in a time that was the end of this movement. So there was a movement, it's very interesting, where poetry became transformative educational experience for Muslims. So this is a really cool poem. And what he says in the beginning is, the first obligation upon any Muslim, right, upon any Muslim. تَصِيحُ إِيمَانِهِ وَيَعْرِفَ. The first is to correct our iman. And how we should understand iman is عَلَقَ مَعَ Allah, is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what our iman is, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Then he says, وَيَعْرِفَ مُصْلِحَ فَرْضَ عَيْنِ كَالْأَحْكَامِ. And then the second is to know, the second obligation upon us is to know the individual obligations properly, like salah, siyam, zakat, certain ethics that we all have to hold on to, like being truthful, staying positive. These are actually our fara'id. And we're going to talk about this in Getting It Right, in the class Getting It Right. He said, you know, كَالْأَحْكَامِ لِتُخْلِي وَالصَّلَاةِ وَالصِّيَامِ. He says, you know, these individual obligations are like purification, like fasting, and prayer. وَوَاجِبُ حِفْظُ حُدُودِ الْحَيِّ. And then after that is to look after the orders of God. You know, the prohibitions and the orders. بِوَقْفِ عِنْدَ أَمْرِهِ وَنَهِي. So that we stop, you know, in front of his orders, in front of his prohibitions. So that's the third thing. So what are they? Number one is our relationship with Allah. Number two is the individual obligations. Number three is to learn and be careful whenever we do something that we are not violating the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last one, يَتُوبَ قَبَلَ سَخْطَ اللَّهِ, that, you know, the person should constantly be repenting. This is the fourth. That we should always be in a state. We talked about this last Thursday and Wednesday. Riyadh al-Salihin. Subhanahu wa alayhi bil malaik. So what we're going to talk about is our relationship with Allah. And what we're going to do is something really awesome. One of the fruits of studying with people, right, is, and it's not to say that you have to study with people, right? Because in many ways we are living in an age where, you know, the president of Columbia University was on NPR saying how, you know, major institutions are threatened by how Khan Academy has come about. Right? Education now is going beyond the walls of the academy. And also in Muslim communities, if I can watch lectures of Sheikh Nouman Ali Khan, you know, who does an incredible job of explaining the Quran, you know, then my local religious needs might change. Because I'm receiving education at home. I had one auntie, who I met, and she's like, I feel like I know you. And I was like, how? She's like, because when I was pregnant with this baby, I listened to Mothers of Believers. And then I had this baby, I listened to Purification of the Soul. And then I've been listening to Tafsir with my third baby. So I was like, every time you have babies, like this. But the beauty of that is that she's linked that experience to her own experiences in life too. Like, she didn't go to the masjid to learn it. And I think we need to empower each of us to feel an individual responsibility to learn on our own. When I learned Arabic initially on my own. Because there was a sheikh I became Muslim with from Marcy Avenue, Brooklyn, who I said, man, I want to learn Arabic. He said, well, then quit waiting for people to come and teach it to you. You have to be kind of like a self-starter. So, we're going to do something cool though, because when you do study with, the masters, it's awesome because they offer reflections that have, kind of brewed over years, and they're able to take things that we would see as really almost, and that happens in the academy. I had like Gardner, if you're in Harvard, like I studied Gardner's, learning styles. When you meet him, you're like ways where like, I'm not worthy. He's like so incredible, right? But then I asked him a few questions, and like he took, this issue of Piaget and something we're talking about, and he just like, bam. I was like, how'd you do that, man? Like, the heck just happened, right? Just like the blind sheikh in his poetry. So people that have that kind of cognition coupled with experience and age, that's hikmah. And we should value wisdom, right? So watch what we're going to do. We're going to talk about something I learned from someone. We're going to take all the 40 hadith of Imam An-Nawawi in 20 minutes. And you're like, how the heck are we going to do that? Right? Inshallah, we're going to try. And what we're going to do is try to understand the logic of An-Nawawi. Because I said this to people before when I was teaching at the Maghrib class on Sacred Scrolls, I believe it's called. When you're reading a book of a scholar, it's like listening to Mozart. Right? It's like watching Paul Pierce, try to jump from free throw line. It's art. And what that means is things are happening that are mantuq and mafhum. Meaning things are written in the text in front of you that you see, that you learn, but then there's also a philosophy of the writer. You see the philosophy of Imam An-Nawawi. Why did he put this hadith here? Why did he put this hadith here? Right? And that's why when people say, yeah, I just picked up Bukhari and I found this hadith. I'm like, man, Bukhari is like C++2 in the hadith language. Like, he sorry for the old references, I'm a Mani's baby, but like, there's things that people might not catch. So we're going to go through the relationship with Allah. And the first thing that the scholars talked about are certain things we should believe about God that are an obligation upon us. Number one is His wujud, that He exists. And they said, أول واجب على من كلف أن يعرف الله. To know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يجب لله الوجود والقدم. And the first thing is to know that Allah exists. He exists. And then the ulama, they would say the fruit of knowing Allah's existence is reverence and humility. This is our relationship with Allah. And what's the evidence for that understanding His existence leads to reverence and humility is Umar. What did Umar do? What verse did he hear when he became Muslim? Who knows the verse he heard? What does it say? Innani ana Allah. Fa'budani wa aqim as-salah li dhikri. The verse in Surah Taha, indeed I am Allah. Right? When he heard that, the fruit of coming to the conclusion that God exists is what? Khasha. Is reverence. Is submission. Islam. Right? After that is awlawiyatuhu subhanahu, that He has no beginning. وأخرويته, and He has no end. Abi Zayd said, ليس له الابتداء ولا نهاية. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find this in Surah Ahadeeth, the second verse, هو الأول والآخر. Right? The scholar said, what's the fruit of that relationship of truly having conviction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning and no end, is to be indifferent to this dunya. Because the conclusion about this dunya is that it what? We all see it in front of us. What happens? We saw it last night. It's going to what? It's going to end. وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. And what's with Allah is going to last. So they say the fruit of having that understanding of Allah's, infancy, is that He's infinite, is that you're going to be zahid. And they said, another thing that one of our teachers said, is that zuhd fi dunya wa raqb fi al-akhirah. That the person who knows that will be indifferent to this dunya and they'll have hope in the hereafter. They'll have a sense of belonging. And that's why in Surah Al-Baqarah, it's really cool. When Allah talks to Adam and his wife, He says, قُلْ نَهْبِطَ مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا. Both of you get out of Jannah. But there's other verses where it says, قُلْ نَهْبِطُ. All of you. So my teacher told me from synagogue, he said to me, why sometimes does he say all of you get out of Jannah? Because that's like your original home, and that's where you're going to go back one day. That's where you're from. Right? That's your hood. Right? That's where your second is. Right? Where you'll stay. After that, we believe مُخَالَفَةُ لِلْحَوَادِثِ, that Allah is not like His creation. And His creation is not like Him. We say, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. What's the fruit of that? The scholar said the fruit of that is to be excited about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many people get excited about sneakers that come out that like no one else has? Like you could have sneakers, and me too. You could have like sneakers, but for me it's dress shoes. You could have like sneakers in your house that are nice, and you're at the mall and suddenly you see like these new green rondos that no one else has, and you're like, you know what? I need to buy these. You know you didn't need to buy them. What encouraged us to do that is the uniqueness, tamyiz. Right? So they said if anyone truly thinks about the uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they'll constantly be excited as His servants. The same fresh feeling that they have when they, oh man, this is so fly, oh this is so amazing. Wow, I have an iPad, but I just want the one that's a little smaller. Why? I have no idea. And they did a survey of people when the last iPad came out, 63% of the people who bought it had no idea why they bought it. It was reported, I think, in the New York Times. 63% of people were like, I don't know, just it's Apple. So it's Apple, like so what? Right? So constantly having that shine, maybe that's the word that we're looking for, in understanding our relationship with وَلِلَّهِ مَثَلُ أَعْلَى. So they said when we understand مُخَالَفَةُ لِلْحَوَادِثِ, number one is the absence of shirk. No one will worship anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two is to constantly feel like empowered. And that's why one of our teachers once, a brother came to him and he said, I feel depressed. He said, say La ilaha illallah. He's like, why? He said, if you say that, he didn't say don't go seek help or whatever, but he's saying, you're so lucky to say that. You're so lucky to have this relationship with the unique one. The one who nothing is like Him. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll stop there. And after that, there are behavioral signs. There's actually 20 of these attributes and we don't have time to talk about them. But there are signs that are going to come out of a healthy relationship with God. The first is sincerity. Hence, the first hadith in the 40 hadith is the hadith on what? Exactly. As though Imam Nawawi is saying to you, listen, you took care of this relationship with God peace. Now it's time for you to get down. It's time for you to work on yourself. One of the things I noticed last night in our discussions is the propensity to project frustrations on uncles, on a hidden board. And I understand that frustration because I've dealt with it. I was thrown out of a community once because, hardcore mafia, soprano type board games. It happened, right? It happens. But it's good, man. It's all good. Alhamdulillah, we learn from those bad experiences. You work out better when the treadmill goes up, by the way. It's proven. Right? If it stays flat, people don't get a good workout. So adversity causes us to work harder. So as though Nawawi is saying, listen, you got that, now start to work on yourself. And the first most important thing after understanding God and the Prophet is to be sincere. That's why the ulama say that ikhlas is the fruit of a healthy tawheed. It's the fruit of a healthy tawheed. Not tawheed just to argue, why you mentioned 20 attributes, why tawheed is 3. We don't have time for that in America. Do we really have time to sit around and argue about stuff like that? Or do we need to work on building capacity in ourselves, in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why he begins with that hadith. Then the sign of sincerity, I remember when I became Muslim, and I said to my teacher, the Senegalese sheikh, who's just like, my mentor for 10 years, I said to him, man, what should I do now? He's like, you need to learn. So what's the second hadith in the 40 hadith? This is the cliff notes of the 40 hadith, mashallah. What's the second hadith? Hadith of Jibreel. I have problems sometimes with how people have put Bayan al-Islam wal Iman wal Ihsan. That's what the heading is. That's not from the Imam. Imam Nawawi didn't put that chapter heading. Just like Sahih Muslim now, the chapter headings in Sahih Muslim, that was done by Qadi Iyad, not by Imam Muslim. So that means that's how that person understood this chapter. That's the context that he or she understood it. But there's something else happening in this hadith outside of what's explicit about clarifying what is faith, clarifying what is Islam, clarifying what is Iman. How is that happening in the hadith? What backdrop is that happening in? Through what means is it happening in? Think, I know it's early, but nobody's sleeping in this class. I will get you. Right? Right? Not here. The pin ain't lifted here. The pin is coming down on your head. I'm just joking. If you need to sleep, honestly, if you feel sleepy or you're tired, don't worry. I understand. Because you're human. So don't be scared. But what is going on? Everybody's like, dang, so you got serious. Just need something nice. Okay, fine. Don't sleep. So, what's going on? How is this happening? Think. How are we learning about, there's the hint, Iman, Ihsan, and Islam? What means did Allah use to teach us this?
The pen. The angel.
Huh?
Angel,
okay, what's Angel Jibreel coming as?
Teacher.
He's coming as not a teacher, but as a what? As a student. Oh yeah. This is how you study that. No, that's a dope O. That O is priceless. That's the O where people say, you know what people say when they see this? Nawawi was a baller. Like Imam Nawawi was a G. I never thought about that before, right? Because that's where that experience with, Gardner, right? Those kind of people when they're just like, the Yoda type shot. And you're like, dang, the O, right? So, exactly. So Imam Nawawi is telling you, Iman and Islam and Ihsan, you have to learn. Islam has 3 things that you need to focus on. But the way to get it is to be a student. The way to get it is to seek. And also there's a lesson to imams and activists. Make sure you teach people. Right? Don't get so busy in divorce court that people are coming to you with questions about evolution, about postmodernity, about realities of life. I'm busy, man. Well, then why the heck are you the imam, dude? Like, what do you do? I solve problems that I'm not trained to solve. Right? So there's an actual community model happening in this hadith. Think about it at a Linsky-esque Rules for Radicals type background. And that is self-starter. I'm coming to ask questions, but institutionally, I'm here to answer questions for you. What should you ask about first now comes into play in this hadith where we take the Fabda'in, Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Yani, Islam is practice, Iman is faith, Ihsan is tasawwuf. Hadihi talata are the foundations of Islam. That's what he's telling you. So now he's saying, in your personal development with God, if you're sincere, you're going to be humble enough to study and ask questions and seek. Institutions should facilitate that for you, like what Mass Youth has done here, mashallah. And then, when you start to learn, focus on these things first. Did you see that? Did we even read the hadith? But everybody knows the hadith, alhamdulillah. Now, after that, it's like, out of all of those things, what's the most important thing to start with? So now I know he's teaching you the concept of what? Al-awlawiyat, priorities. Prioritize your relationship with Islam and Iman. The next hadith is the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar, who said what? That the Prophet said what? Islam is built on... Exactly. Why did he put that after the hadith he just mentioned? Because this is takhsis al-am. As though he's saying, everything I mentioned is super important, but if you don't have time, work on this after Iman. If you don't have time, at least do this, because this is what you need to get to Jannah. And that is Salah, Zakat, Siyam, Hajj. Pretty cool, huh? Are you guys okay? Now, what's the next challenge? So now we've accepted, we've experienced the existence of God. We've tasted a little sincerity. May Allah increase us in sincerity. Number 3, we've moved into a model of studying, seeking knowledge, a community that facilitates that process for me regardless of who I am. And you can build on these. These are principles. Why do you think Imam An-Nawawi, here's his hint in his introduction. And I'm very angry about 2 things. The translations of the 40 hadith very rarely have his introduction. That's a disaster. Because in his introduction, he's alluding to his philosophy. Why did I bring this? Why did I do this? Right? In Egypt, in Azhar, we had some mashaykh, the only thing they teach is introductions. We had one, the Mukhtasar Ibn Hajm al-Usul al-Fiqh, the shaykh, he only taught the introduction for 3 years. People got mad. One brother's like, you know, if we're doing Oklahoma language, like, Dad, come in, sheikh. Yo, only teaches for 3 years. So the sheikh said, I want you to go home and read this chapter from Ibn Hajj's Mukhtasar, the 2nd volume. He went, he came back, and he said, I understood everything. He said, that's the fruit of studying his introduction. Like, I empowered you to read the book on your own. Right? So, when we don't translate, especially someone like Nawawi, this incredible person, his introduction, that's a disaster, man. Also, Riyadh al-Salihin, we talked about that on Wednesdays, how most of the English translations, his introduction is not translated. But what does he say in both introductions? He says, I have collected, here in particular, the 40 hadith, he said, I have collected 40 hadith that form the bedrock of a person's life who wants to go to Jannah. Like, that's a baller's education mission statement, man. If you want to go to Jannah, rock these 40 hadith. And that's why one of our teachers, someone used to come to him and say, I want to read the Muwatta. I want to read Bukhari. I want to read Tirmidhi. And he would say to him, Ahafith al-Arba'inat. Did you finish? Did you memorize the 40? Yeah. Did you understand them? No. Then let's start with those. Because that's why he brought these together. So after Iman and after practice and study and institution and the importance of institution building, we understand that the Prophet did in his masjid. He starts to look at things that could potentially harm you after you've arrived to that maqam. And he alludes to important qualities that we have to, inculcate or to bring in. I'm so sleepy. To bring into, I slept in my car after Fajr because it was too cold in my cabin. I turned my car. No, man, I had to, it was good, man. And I was like, yeah. Sorry, brothers. I love you much. My small car. So these qualities we should bring into our lives in order to preserve that, right? And the first is listiqama, to be consistent. And now you understand the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. At the end of it where it says, there's a person who's going to live like they're from Jannah, حَتَّى يَكُنْ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهَا ذِرَاءٌ, until there's between him and Jannah an arm's length. And a person who lives like they're going to hell until there's an arm's length between them and hell, and then they change by the will of God and live like people of Jannah and enter Jannah, or vice versa. What is he alluding? And my sheikh, when I read this with the sheikh once, he started crying at this hadith. And he said, Allahumma thabbitni. He's like, oh Allah, keep me straight, make me straight. And he's like, and then he told me, he was shaking, he said, this hadith is scary. And I was like 23, I'm like, what are you talking about? And he was like, this hadith is really terrifying because it implies وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. And difficult times, hardships, problems that fall into our lives should not shake our resolve and our relationship with Allah. And that's what Imam Ibn Ta'ala said, من علامة الاعتماد على العمل وجود نقصان عند وجود الزلل. I don't know how to translate that, man. He said, from the signs that Ibn Ata'Allah and Al-Hikam said, from the signs that you trusted on your deeds instead of God, is that when hardship comes, you waver. Because deeds are something that are going to end. So logically, the human being knows, well, I'm not relying on myself. It's stupid. Right? It's deception, ghurur. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, حَيٌّ لَا يَمُوتُ. So he said, من علامات الاعتماد على العمل وجود نقصان عند وجود الزلل. He said, that you find this نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. this loss of hope when hardship comes. So An-Nawawi is saying here, and that's why the hadith talks about you were, in your mother's uterus, then you became this, then you were born, then this happens, as though it's alluding to, listen, man, you're constantly going to be in flux. Right? You're constantly, from the time that you were created to the time that you die, إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَاسْتَقِيمْ عَلَىٰ طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ. So he's saying the first quality after you've achieved this is to be straight and upright. The next is bid'ah, innovation. After istiqamah, in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be careful of falling into innovation in religion. And that's a long, long discussion, right? But in general, to be careful, to cling to the sunnah. And that's why he quotes the hadith of Aisha, مَنْ أَحْدَثَ فِي أَمْرِنَا هَذَا مَا لَيْسَ مِنْهُ فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. The third danger to this is to fall into the doubtful matters. Now, what I want you to see, are you guys okay? I want you to see the logic of, no, yes.
What could we do right now?
Yeah, we're at the 6th. Yeah, sorry. You stop me like that too if you need me to. So the 6th hadith again addresses the third danger to your iman is what? Doubtful matters. Shubuhat. So Imam An-Nawawi lays out a process of ikhlas, a process of study, acquiring iman and ihsan, understanding the most important things you should focus on, and then he immediately begins to address qualities that you should acquire, what are called takhliyan, tahliyan. Acquiring qualities and removing qualities. Acquiring qualities, and actually the word in Arabic is like when you put on jewelry, sisters, right? That it's like you embellish yourself with these qualities. Tahliya. Tahliya means to remove them from you. So the first he mentions is listiqamah. The second he mentions is bid'ah. And now the third is following into shubuhat. Imam Al-Ghazali said shubuhat are those things where it's halal and haram and it's hard to know which is which. Like which one is more. The rule for those kind of things, aslu hatak, is to leave them. But the mufti, there are times where the mufti, if he's dealing with a person on an individual level, he can allow that because it's best for that person only. It's called fatwa khas, for a specific situation. And that's why internet fatwas sometimes are problematic, because you could be reading a fatwa that was written for a specific context, right? And actually we have a rule that says, that type of fatwa you can't continue. So what is the hadith? The hadith of Nu'man, where the Prophet said, the halal is clear and between them is what? Exactly. So now we allude to this issue of shubuhat. You guys okay? Sure? Yes. The thing is time. I got till 10:20. I got to rock this. You know what I mean? So what you should do? You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. Okay, I'm old now. I left Facebook. I graduated. But write me and say I don't understand. I love that. I enjoy that. I don't understand where's this hadith for this? Where's the hadith for this? And I'll write it back to you. Right? I'm writing something on this too. It just takes forever from a delay. So this is the hadith we're talking about now. It's the 6th hadith from Nu'man, who the Prophet loved him. Yes, Muhammad.
Is the use of shubha here the same as it's used in the Quran, or is it two different meanings?
Here it means shubahat in the ruling. In the Quran, shubahat means the meaning. But here it means the ruling. Shubahat means ambiguous. Right? Ambiguous. But the definition given by Ghazali here is something that there's halal and haram in it. And it says, لا يعلم كثير من الناس لا يعلم أحكامها. Meaning the hadith that most people don't know the ruling behind it. So he's talking about al-wara, to be cautious, to preserve our iman, to preserve ourselves. And the Prophet said every religion has a unique quality, and the unique quality of Islam is al-wara, is that the believer is protecting of their faith. The 7th hadith, is talking about now what are the things we can do to protect our religion. And that's why it's the hadith on nasiha. And the Prophet said, ad-dinu nasiha. Why would he say that? The usage in Arabic is very weird. It's hard to translate. If you're going to translate, like, al-hajj arafah is the meaning. Same feeling. Hajj is arafah. Why? Because the most important thing in hajj is what? Arafah. So when he said, ad-dinu nasiha, the most important thing that's going to preserve deen is what? Nasiha. And nasiha to Allah means sincerity. To the Prophet, sincerity. But to the Muslims, and that's why yesterday it's an interesting discussion. But also, a Muslim has an obligation on another Muslim to tell them if they're doing something wrong. The problem is how and when. Right? How and when. And he's going to talk about this later on when he talks about how communities have certain obligations. And he mentions the hadith, whoever sees an evil should what? Should change it. But here, nasiha means in our love, in our concern, in our sincerity. And the word nasiha in Arabic actually is used when a garment is ripped and you take it to a tailor and he repairs it. Nasaha thawb. He makes nasiha of the thawb. So if I see a rip in a brother or sister's and that I love and I know very well in their personality, I'm not going to just like go and like bombard them. I'm going to try to be as careful as the tailor is with what? With the clothes that he's repairing. And also the next, after nasiha, he talks about the hurma of the Muslim. How, and that goes kind of to the discussion yesterday, how we interact with each other. And he talks, and he quotes the hadith of the Prophet that the blood of, the blood of a Muslim cannot be spilled except in 3 situations. What we understand also from this hadith is not only the physical aspect of al-qatl, but also that we are not allowed to destroy people through our character and our behavior, also based on things which are not absolutely clear, like takfir. This person is not on this minhaj. This person is a fasik. This person is wrong. All this is very childish. The Prophet said, whoever said that a Muslim is a kafir, he's wrong, then he becomes what he claimed. Right? Then it continues and he addresses another aspect of protecting the deen, and that is the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar, umirtu an uqatil an-nas. Jihad. Right? And we know jihad has its rulings and its conditions. There's no jihad without an emir. But he mentions it as if to say, not only is there this interpersonal institutionalization of protecting religion, but also there is an institutionalization of protecting the deen at an institutional level. So at an internal level, as brothers, we give nasiha. At an external level, how can we bring that into America? The need to have strong, functioning, non-mediocre institutions. Why is it we only have one imam? I'm not hinting at anything. I'm just saying, why is it that there's only one imam? You go to most large churches, most large synagogues, they have how many? At least 3. And then they have a chaplain on the side who handles pastoral care. Because many times those rabbis, I was meeting with them like, we're not trained in pastoral issues. We need to bring chaplains into the community. Right? Mediocrity cannot be the norm. And I hate when we talk like as Muslims, well, other organizations did it this way. I don't care about other organizations. Inna Allah kataba al-ihsana ala kulli shay. So it will come insha'Allah ta'ala. After that, he goes back to individual responsibilities and leads again to the brotherhood responsibilities. And that's why he mentions in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is the 9th hadith, that the Prophet said, مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوا وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. What I ordered you to do it as best as you can. What I forbid you to do, stay away from it. Why would he mention this after the chapter on nasiha? Because we have a ruling. Nasiha in religious arenas can only be given in the face of the following conditions. Number 1, certainty. I can't, maybe not. And then go to someone and assume the worst. This will destroy them. Number 2, I have to make sure that it is something which is not debated amongst the scholars. So if I see someone eating chicken last night, I go like, brother, you're eating chekka, and it's not zabiha, and this is totally haram. You can't do that. Why? Because there are a large number of ulama who allow that. It doesn't follow under bab al-nasiha. But nasiha follows under those things which the scholars agreed upon are egregious, or the text of Quran and Sunnah agree on are egregious. So that's why he mentions al-awamir wal-nawahi. The orders the Prophet brought and the prohibitions of the Prophet brought, this is the arena of this type of discussion. This is the arena of this type of discussion. And then at the end he says, فَإِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. The thing that destroyed most people is asking questions. What he means here, the Prophet is not asking questions to create problems. And we have a very beautiful principle. You should write this down. This axiom should, I talked to Muhammad about this earlier today. Imam Suhaib dedicates an entire chapter on this. That any question that doesn't lead to practice or practical deeds, you should avoid it. And that's why when the man came to the Prophet and said, when is the hour? The Prophet said to him what? You know, esoterically, the hour is, you know, according to like deconstructional theory. And he said, what'd you prepare for it? So Shatabi says, look how the Prophet takes him away from theoretical to practical. Look in the Quran, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. They ask you about the moons. قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. Say, we use them to tell time and for Hajj. So constantly the Quran takes questions and links it back to Al-A'mal. So that's why Al-Banna in Usul Ashrin, actually he took most of Usul Ashrin is from the Muwafaqat al-Shatibi. Right? It's from the book of Shatibi. He has the same in the 13th also, I believe, you know, that anything that doesn't lead to a practical application doesn't mean strategy, because strategy ultimately has a practical application. What he means here is just asking questions to create trouble, to create problems. Other than that, questions are actually considered commendable in Islam. So we learn from that, we infer two things. We have a principle called, yes?
Does that mean that if you're uncertain where your sincerity lies, and it's a good deed, that you should do it nonetheless?
Of course, if you're not sure, just rock it. And if the sheikh loves you or the teacher loves you, he's not going to get mad at you. Right? That's the adab of the teacher. You know? And we shouldn't make it that hard. Like, am I certain? Am I not certain? I don't know. Like, am I sincere? Am I not sincere? Like, the anxiety, you know, shouldn't be there. Right? Unfortunately. I hate when people hear. People come, I'm sorry. Well, I got to ask a question. Why are you sorry? Like, if I answer you right, I get some ajr, man. Let me hook it up. I need the ajr with Allah. I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. I apologize. But we've been conditioned, unfortunately, in our communities to think this way. Right? And it's not a healthy thing. You know, when the Prophet used to say, when the youth would come to the Prophet and say, Marhaban shabab, he welcomed the youth. Fas'al, ask me. And Aisha said, the blessed women are Ansar, because they used to ask questions. Shyness, they didn't stop them from asking questions. So we got to hurry because we're running out of time. The next thing he talks about is an important individual characteristic of anyone on the path, and that is dua. We're so connected, but we're so disconnected. You know, we're so smart, but we're so stupid. Right? So, do we make dua with the same propensity that we check our Facebook? Or our Twitter? Of course, it's not possible, right? But that does tell us we can allocate time on a daily basis to talk to God. Imam Shafi said something awesome, man. He said, when I get lonely and depressed, I talk to God. This is Shafi, man. Like, that's the Shafi I want to hang out with. Because that's the Shafi that's like me, dude. You know, I know, like, he looked at a book, he memorized it in 2 seconds. That ain't me. Right? I mean, that's awesome, and I love that, and but I can't be that way. But when I hear Imam Shafi say, when I'm depressed, when I'm sad, when I'm lonely, I speak to God in dua. Like, that's the Shafi I think I can relate to more, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he mentions the dua, but then also he mentions the etiquettes of dua. And what the Prophet is doing here is teaching us, and what An-Nawawi is alluding to here is the completeness of your personality. The interior and the exterior got to be in order. So it's not only dua, but he talks about a man who was traveling and his clothes were what? His clothes were nasty, his hair was, disheveled. فَمَطْعَمَهُ حَرَامٌ وَشَرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ. The Prophet said his sources of, food and drink were forbidden. فَأَنَّ يُسْتَجَابَ لَهُ. So how is Allah going to accept his dua? إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى طَيِّبٌ لَا يَقْبَلُ إِلَّا طَيِّبًا. Allah is good and He only accepts what's good. So He's saying, not only do you have the physical practice, but you've also taken into consideration, if you're going to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with dua, there's other components, and that is your source of income. I had a sheikh once, man, this is a deep story, in Egypt, and I was reading Quran with him, and he asked me, Sheikh Ba'bula in Tawagim, and he asked me, what a name, and he asked me, he said, hey, where'd you get those shoes? I have these really fly Nikes. So I was like, my country. He was like, what company is that? I was like, oh God. It's freaking Green Check or something. So I was like, they're Nike. He's like, you're a parody of theology. Those are made by your brothers in Indonesia. You're a joke. He was like, you're supporting oppression. I was like, قال ألم أقل لكم إني أعلم الغيب. As a trying to read Quran. He's like, لا تقرأ. اسمع. Right? If someone said to us, now we like call the Department of Education or something. But it was like powerful. I was like, dude, what do you know about this? You freaking in the wagon, man. It's like this little qarya outside of Cairo. He's like, Indonesian brothers and sisters, you know. He's like, I understand there's an income issue and that's one problem. And he's like, I'm talking to the OCI about how to fix this. He was a deep check. He's you yourself, you're contributing to that and your ashabu kitabillah. So that component of responsibility and then also spirituality. We find sometimes in our community, oh, I feel so spiritually great. But then externally we could be treating people in the worst possible way. Or we have the Zahir, Ibn al-Jawzi talks about a person who keeps his pants above his ankles, right? But then he looks down on everyone else who doesn't. So Ibn al-Jawzi said he blotted out the positive with a greater negative, which is arrogance. So what I know what he's saying is Shumuliyatul Mu'min, Kamal al-Mu'min, the completeness of the believer, internal and external coupled with dua. I don't know if we're going to finish given how much time is. The other area that we have to focus on, and he now reiterates certain things. Because dua also is a sign of ikhlas. And the first hadith was what? About ikhlas. And also earlier he mentioned the hadith of Nu'man. Here he's going to build on that hadith. What's the hadith? The 6th hadith about doubtful issues. And he mentions the hadith of the grandson of the blessed Prophet ﷺ, who said, leave what makes you doubtful, what doesn't make you doubt. Da'ma yuribuki bima la yuribuki. And that's not an easy thing to do. Abu Ubaidah said, no one will be a true muttaqi until he leaves certain things that are halal, doubting that they might lead him to haram. So there's this issue of wara. The other characteristic that he mentions that we should have in the 12th hadith is there are things that are important, and then there are things that are really important. Al-muhim wal-aham. And the danger of involving ourselves in things that don't have any real benefit to us in the hereafter. So he quotes the hadith of the Prophet, the best Muslim is the one who leaves things ma la ya'ni, which don't concern him or her. Think about it right now. This was last night what I wanted actually to frame the discussion in, but I didn't want to I don't want to be a dictator, is like, let's only talk about sphere of influence. Let's not talk about sphere of concern. If you're in a discussion with Muslims, and start to ask him, are we talking about things that affect our sphere of influence or sphere of concern? I've done that and people will be like, I have nothing to talk about. You have nothing you can influence? And some of the scholars of Tasawwuf, they said, someone who always talks about concerns instead of influences, this is a manifestation of the sickness in their soul because they don't want to deal with real responsibility. So they're constantly living in, sloganeering. Right? Whereas, and don't anyone raise your hands, like, how many people have trouble just praying Fajr, man? You have like Muslim activists who don't pray Fajr. What the heck is that? Like Fajr? Like, you have to. People that are involved in the work who neglect fundamental things that they have to have. So, a lot of times that happens because we're more concerned about things that don't really have any bearing in our hereafter. In our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best example I can give of this is my own mother, right? We take our parents for granted. Wallahi, we do. No matter how much we try to do good to them, it's just a reality. So my mother calls me about a year and a half ago. She's like, baby, and when mama says baby from the country, that's like, sit down, it's like, sami'na wa ta'na. So she's like, I have breast cancer. So you hear mom and cancer. It's like someone put glasses on you. You see the world differently. So what do you think? I call my mother Hamda every day. But then it's like twice a day. Things change. You appreciate, right? So a lot of times we're caught up in things that don't have any concern. Gossip, backbiting, slandering. And our scholars told us because the soul doesn't want to deal with itself. It likes to outsource its drama. We call it, I think Amo's in here, right? Projecting stuff. Whereas we need to be more focused, not to the point of selfishness, but on things that I can directly influence. A good example is what you guys are doing at MIT, right? Mentoring kids. That's absolute concern. right? La, influence. Like you're impacting young children's lives. That's when you came in my office and I let you talk for like an hour. But it was awesome. No, because it was baller what he was telling me. Like we're mentoring. That's the kind of stuff. Like he didn't come to my office like, what's the deal with the Salafis and Sufis and what's up with Zaytuna and Yasser Qadi and I don't have time for that kind of stuff, man. But he comes to me and says, that kind of people, you know what I do? Here's the secret. I meet them out in front, not in the office. But when they come and tell me this brother wants to talk about mentoring children in the community, I was like, Khush al-tu, right? Bring him in. Why? Because this is directly benefiting people. It's not theoretical. And it's involving you having to look in yourself and focus on what really concerns our community. And one of them is mentoring young people. We have young converts now. We're trying to encourage them and go to college. Go to school. We have a young Muslim brother who became Muslim. He couldn't afford to go to school. He's from the projects. One brother in the community is like, you know what? I'll pay for your curriculum. He's paying for his education. Like that's like baller. Like that's concern. That's not just influence. And now this brother who converted, his parents were attacking him. He's like, dude, the Muslims are paying for me to go to school. They're not sending me to Afghanistan. They're sending me to MIT. And whose mother or father would not want to hear that their child is going to school, right? So those kind of institutional, philosophical understandings of concern and influence. And here he's saying the best of you is the one who doesn't concern yourself in your Islam with things that don't directly have an influence into your life and those around you. Then he talks about the completeness of Iman. And here Imam An-Nawawi in the 13th, only 13th hadith, not to fly. The 13th, I'm waiting for the time signal. The 13th hadith, he takes from the individual now to the community. And this is the hadith of Anas ibn Malik. The Prophet loved Anas. Talk about concern and influence and mentorship. Anas was like 9 years old and he started kicking it with the Prophet, dude. He used to carry the water for the Prophet's wudu. And he said, I never saw anyone nicer than him. He said, he never hit me. He never yelled at me. He never abused me. He said his hands were like silk. Anas was so amazed with the Prophet. We have hadith of him describing how the Prophet smelled. He said his sweat smelled like misk. Alayhi salam. This was Anas because his mom sent him to Islamic school. What was Islamic school at that time? Oh, Muhammad, take my son, let him kick it with you. Alright, cool, let's kick it. So Anas ibn Malik relates this hadith. Now we're going to shift kind of to the need for fraternity. You can't do this on your own. I can't do this on my own. And that's why he mentions this hadith. None of you will truly believe till you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Why does it come like here? Because he mentioned all of these individual qualities that we kind of have to acquire. And now he takes it into brotherhood. And that's why the next hadith, he talks about the sanctity of the Muslim in our brotherhood. 1 minute? Wow. So he talks about the sanctity of the Muslims and how our engagement with each other. And there are three things that really define our relationship with each other. Number one, it should not be based on suspicion. The Prophet said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالظَّنَّ فَإِنَّ الظَّنَّ أَكْذَبُ الْحَدِيثِ. We should always assume the best, man. Even so someone doesn't salam me, oh, I know they didn't like me. Dude, don't be so freaking self-inebriated, man. Like, God, just say salam to you, the world's not going to come. And this is the quality of the hypocrite. يَحْسَبُونَ كُلَّ صَيْحَةٍ عَلَيْهِ. In Quran, the hypocrite always thinks everyone's against me. Everyone's against me. It's mentioned in Quran. La, man, he didn't say salam to me. Why? Because he didn't see you, duh. It's not a big deal. And I remember once, a brother wasn't in Boston, I was going to say that, came to me, he's like, man, this brother don't like me, this brother's not good. I was like, why? He didn't say salam to me. I was like, let's go talk to the brother. Went to the brother, he's like, Wallahi ma shuftak. It's like, I didn't see you, dude. He's like, oh. You're all over here in a tizzy because he didn't see you. Like, astaghfirullah. Right? Number two, that we are not allowed to degrade the status of a Muslim as being righteous and good except in the face of something that's absolutely clear. Meaning the sanctity of a mu'min, the sanctity of a Muslim is qat'i, definitive. And it's not removed with anything that's ambiguous. That's why Imam Abu Hanifa said, a Muslim cannot leave Islam except the way he became a Muslim. How do people become Muslim? They stand in front of the community, they take shahada. So what he's saying is, we don't bring doubt into that stuff, man. And now we see this is a fitna, right? Imam Malik said, if I had 99 reasons to believe that someone was not Muslim, and one reason to believe they were Muslim, I'll go with the one. Because al-yaqeen la yazulu bi shakk. Now the acts, the opposite of this, hyper-takfir. We'll try to finish quickly. At least we'll get to 20. Then the next hadith, which is the 15th hadith, is the etiquettes of our brotherhood and sisters. How should we institutionalize and function as brothers and sisters? And that is, whoever believes in Allah and the last day should speak well or what? Remain silent. Man, such a simple thing. Right? Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should be generous to their neighbor. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should be generous to the guest. And the ulama commented on these two hadith, as well as the hadith of Imam Ahmad that said this brotherhood extends to the non-Muslims. Because the hadith of Imam Ahmad says, لا يبلغ عبد الحقيقة الإيمان حتى يحب للناس ما يحب لنفسه من الخير. That a person will never be a true believer till he loves for people what he loves for himself. And this is ithar and so on. And the next hadith is what? Anger. How many of us have seen or experienced in our own lives we destroyed because the relationship with each other, our relationship with each other is sacred. Understand that. Our ukhuwah is a sacred ukhuwah. Right? How many of us have seen that sacred bond destroyed because of anger? You know how many divorces I've seen in the Muslim community out of anger? Most of the time. Anger. Right? Anger issues. So the Prophet ﷺ, when Abu Hurairah said, advise me, don't act on anger. Advise me, don't act on anger. Advise me, don't act on anger. The last three, and we'll finish, is that we should look to have ihsan towards each other, not mediocrity. So, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ الْإِحْسَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, the 17th hadith. Allah has prescribed excellence in everything. And that means two things. We should strive for excellence at an individual and institutional level, and then we should admit when we're not able to offer it. We shouldn't front. I used to hate that in Egypt, with all respect to Egyptians. Have you ever been lost in Egypt and asked for directions? You know what I'm talking about? He's like, خش على طول بعدين يمين بعدين شمال على طول. شفت العرب بتاع الحس حسني كده اشتري طعام إذا أحببت بعدين امشي على طول كده. I'm like, dude, where the heck are you taking me? لا ألا تصدقني؟ لا أصدقك يا مولانا بس يعني الحاجات دي صعبة أوي. So it's like, what he's saying in Arabic is like, look, dude, I remember I was going to this masjid for Jummah, and everyone would tell me like, oh yeah, I know it exactly. This is not to offend any Egyptians, don't take the wrong way. It's like, take a right, take a left, go straight, take a right, take a left, go straight. It's right there, man. You're going to find it, I promise. And then we would do it, and then we'd meet like a guy, and he's like, لا أنت في أقصى الدنيا مولانا. He's like, you're into the end of the world. The masjid's way over there. He's like, I know exactly where it is though. Take a right, take a left, take a right. And it happened all day. I missed Jummah. Then finally I got to the masjid. He was like, Allahu Akbar. I was like, dude, what the heck, man? Right? It happens here too. In Oklahoma, people do it in their country because they're like shy. They want to say they don't know. Right? But we should admit also when we're not able to function at a proper level. So there's two parts of this. The last two hadith, inshallah, and I know that you're a little bit tired, is that this brotherhood, if there's any question about it, extends to others. And this is why this is Mu'adh, he said, this is the last thing I heard from the Prophet. Imagine Mu'adh said, this is the last words of the Prophet I ever heard, was خَالِقِ النَّاسِ بِخُلِقٍ حَسَنٍ. Is the Prophet commissioned him when he sent him to Yemen, which was a Christian country at that time? He said, be good to people. Be good to people. And that's the 18th hadith. The 19th hadith, insha'Allah ta'ala, is talking about what? Going back to the individual quality of bravery and reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yesterday, Haytham said something beautiful. He wasn't able to share it with Amal's program, but he talked about something with the Quran that's awesome about how it should transcend our needs sometimes for defining ourselves. That our relationship with Allah should be the main source of how we define our reality. Right? So here, in order for us to have stable brotherhood, we need to be secure with each other. We need to trust each other. So the Prophet says, rely on Allah, Ibn Abbas. If you ask of Allah. If you seek the help of Allah. Know that if an entire community came together to harm you, they couldn't harm you or help you except with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last, because we only reached the 20th, and here again, he goes back to certain qualities we should inculcate communally and individually, and the last one is the danger of negligence and the lack of hayat. ما فيش وقت أنا آسف.
I just want to ask, repeat the 18th hadith.
Yeah. The hadith يعني احفظ الله يحفظك. So this hadith now, the last hadith is إذا لم تستحي فاصنع ما شئت, which is about shyness in the community, haya in the community, and also what? Not being negligent. Ibn Qayyim said shaitan destroys people through 3 doors as we finish. Number 1 is the door of anger. Number 2 is the door of desires. Number 3 is the door of negligence. Right? So we'll stop here, but this is like a quick trip through 40 hadith that shows you the themes, and you're able to appreciate, we didn't have enough time, why An-Nawawi put this hadith here. Why did he put this hadith here? Why does he shift from individual capacity to institutional capacity, ukhuwa and the ummah? What, as if to say, all this has to kind of work in concert for it to work. And our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would take out the following. We talked about the obligatory aspects of that relationship with Him. We talked about the fruit of knowing Him to some degree. And then we said after that it's time for us to work on ourselves. And that's where you should approach the 40 hadith. The 40 hadith of Imam An-Nawawi, as he mentioned in his introduction, is a sight map to getting better. It's a sight map for constant improvement. And that's why the scholars say the 40 hadith will never leave you. Like you study it once, doesn't mean, okay, I studied 40 hadith, I'm like, I need jazz, I'm cool. No, we always will need to review these beautiful statements of An-Nawawi. And inshallah, sorry that we weren't able to finish, and it even took a little bit longer time. جزاك الله خيرا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.